You are listening to Dove Valley Deep Divers with Erick Trickel
and Lance Sanderson.
Ball comes out of the hands of Newton. It's on the ground, picked up by T.J. Ward at the 4-yard line. Vaughn Miller did it again.
On Overtime Media.
And it looks like we are live. We'll let Chad get everything set up on the Facebook side of things and make sure that we have green check marks all the way across. It looks like we are, in fact, good to go. Mile high hello, everybody, in Broncos country, and welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Sanderson, and joining me, as per usual, is my good friend and colleague. He is your Denver Broncos insider and Mile High Huddle's senior NFL draft analyst, one and only Erick Trickel. Erick, it's been kind of a rough week for Mr. Sanderson on his side of the things. For you, man, what's going on? How we doing?
On my end, it's been a little bit of a better week. I mean, we were close, had the day off and everything, so I got to stay home on Wednesday. It was just really nice, and I'm glad I'm not feeling ill like I was last week, and just glad to be back and good and here talking Broncos and everything, and really excited for the topic tonight. It was something I was going to do in an article and decided that it would probably be best to do something live for all you guys tuning in with us and just discuss it here with my good buddy and Lance here. I was going to come up with a nickname.
Well, Sicky McSanderson is probably the best one. I actually tested positive, so it's been kind of a rough deal with me over the last few days. And it's just great to finally feel back to normal. I got my taste back and everything like that. So I'm doing a lot better as far as that goes. But yeah, man, we've got a great show planned for you guys tonight. We're going to be breaking down some of the Broncos rookies and how they look as compared to the rest of the rookies across the NFL landscape, specifically the top 5 picks, just because what we've seen with, Justin Sternad obviously getting hurt, and Tyree Cleveland has had some limited impact. Most of his impact has come in the special teams game, but specifically the top 5 picks for the Denver Broncos, including the young rookie wide receivers, Michael Ojemudia as well. But no, it's going to be a fun show for you guys. And before we get started, just want to make sure you guys are all aware of the circumstances. So you guys can follow me on Twitter and follow Erick as well. You can find me at Sanderson MHH and for Erick at Erick Trickel. Also, guys, while you guys are at it, follow at DVDD_pod. That is the podcast account. It's the easiest way to keep up with what's going on with the Dove Valley Deep Divers. Follow at Mile High Huddle. That's the mother account where you can find instant breaking news and analysis on your Denver Broncos. If you guys are financially able and capable of doing so, head on over to huddleuppod.com to get your merch. So you can find this hat right here, the Dove Valley Deep Divers hat. There's hats, t-shirts. There's a face mask for you guys, hoodies, anything to suit the women or the men in the Huddle Up podcast community. If you guys are not financially able to do so, the 3 easiest things you guys can do to help support the show is subscribe wherever you guys are watching, whether it's on YouTube, on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, anything like that. Subscribe to Mile High Huddle. Like every video you guys see, and if you love it, share it. Get it out in front of as many Broncos fans as humanly possible. And last little bit here, guys, is today's episode is sponsored in part by sportsbetting.com. Let's see here. Head on over to sportsbetting.com/Mile High Huddle for a week free. Excuse me. Let me get this pulled up here. Gambling is now legal in the state of Colorado, and here's what makes sportsbetting.com a no-brainer for sports fans. They have sharp odds and low juice. They have in-house bookmakers, and they're not a third-party provider of odds. They have a reduced juice, which means the best prices. They have a hassle-free bonus with a one-time rollover, meaning that the bonus money is yours after you bet it one time. With other sites, it ranges from 5 to 30 times. There's 24/7 live customer support, and there's always a real person to speak with inside the United States. But here's the kicker, guys. At sportsbetting.com, sportsbetting.com. You guys get a 100% risk-free week of sports betting up to $1,000. Not just one bet, but all of your bets. Play for a week, and if your losses exceed your winnings at the end of the week, sportsbetting.com will cover 100% of the difference up to $1,000 with a one-time rollover. So head on over to sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle. That's www.sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle and capitalize on that risk-free week of sports betting up to $1,000. Now, pardon me for struggling my way through that.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Broncos country, listen up. Coors Hard Seltzer is not your average seltzer. Rooted in Coors' long history of sustainability, the brand was inspired by a generation that wants to do good in the world with a mission to restore America's rivers. It's never been easier to do good in the world, to do something to make a difference, and Coors Hard Seltzer is paving the way by launching the world's easiest volunteer program. Whatever you're doing, by simply cracking open a can of Coors Hard Seltzer, you're volunteering because our waterways are at risk. 80% of America's rivers are drying up, but through a partnership with Change the Course, Coors Hard Seltzer is helping to protect and restore America's rivers. The way it works, each 12-pack of Coors Hard Seltzer restores 500 gallons of fresh water to U.S. rivers and the communities that depend on them. The results, 1 billion, that's with a B, gang, gallons of water restored to 16 river basins across the U.S., including the Colorado River, and that's just year one. Also, with Coors Hard Seltzer, you're getting 4 refreshing flavors, and it's one cool cause. Enjoy naturally flavored black cherry, mango, lemon lime, and grapefruit. The specs are in, gang. Coors Hard Seltzer is 4.5% ABV and only 90 calories.
Chad, I can speak from firsthand certainty that nothing quite takes the sting off a tough defeat like a Coors Hard Seltzer. I know that everything will be all right, that I got my black cherry, handy, trusty Coors Hard Seltzer. For a football fan, win or loss, it's the way to go.
You heard it here, gang. So join the world's easiest volunteer program by simply drinking Coors Hard Seltzer. You, yes, you can volunteer to restore America's rivers. You buy Coors Hard Seltzer, you help restore 500 gallons of water into America's rivers. It really is that simple. So visit CoorsSeltzer.com to find a Coors Hard Seltzer near you. That's CoorsSeltzer.com.
For every 12-pack sold through 8/31/2021, Coors will purchase services from Change the Course to restore 500 gallons of fresh river water. Details at CoorsSeltzer.com. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Fort Worth, Texas.
Eric, there's with the Broncos rookies coming up here, Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler are obviously the talk of the town, and there's little question as to why. Obviously, Jerry Jeudy being the 15th overall pick, KJ Hamler being that second-round pick for the Broncos. And with the injuries to Courtland Sutton and with Tim Patrick missing some time as well, Jerry Jeudy has been really kind of the limelight. And excuse me. Sorry. Jerry Jeudy's actually been kind of the limelight. He's been really the main focus for the Denver Broncos on the offensive side of the football. Speak to me on what his impact has been as compared to all of the rest of the rookies across the NFL landscape.
Well, I mean, he just had his first 100-yard game, right?
Yep.
Of the season. So it's been kind of he's made big plays. Don't get me wrong. He's made big plays. He's had a good positive impact, but there's been a big negative impact as well. And those come with some early penalties. Like the last 2 games, he got called for a penalty like on the first or second drive for the Broncos. And then, of course, the drops. I mean, he's tied with, I think, all other rookies receivers. I think 2 others, KJ Hamler being one of them, with 5 drops. CeeDee Lamb is the other. I mean, that's something that will come with time and everything. But it's something that, again, it's what I said prior to the draft, is drops are always going to be there with Jerry Jeudy. It's just how much you can limit them. And in college, he did a better job. He had an 8.3 drop rate in college than he does. And now it's like 17 or 18% or something like that. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head. It's something that he's got to work to get better at. And it's something that the quarterback has to be able to help him out with. For all the issues that Tua Tagovailoa had, it was they were able to help him out Judy out a little bit with the scheme by scheming him open, a little bit less contested catches and some of what he's had to do now. But as we saw in the Jets game, he can go get those contested catches.
Yeah.
But it's also the quarterback of job to sit there with throw with proper touch, proper velocity. And there's times with all three of these quarterbacks that Broncos have started this year that the touch wasn't there. It just came in a little bit too hot, hit his hands, just good defense as well. And some of them, like, not quite pass breakups, but they were able to affect him just enough to get him to drop the ball. And that's something that it's going to take time. I mean, receivers, they take some time with it. And it's going to be interesting to see what continues on. That's something to keep an eye on. We know he can run routes. He's already one of the best route runners in the NFL. He can still improve there, but that's not the biggest area he's got to work on. The biggest area he's got to work on is those hands. If he can get those down, if he can get back to his 8.3 drop percentage that he had in college, if he can have that in the NFL, I can live with that.
Yeah.
But just right now is how I look at drops is for every drop you have, you need to have at least 2 or 3 big plays. He's not quite there yet. Doesn't mean it won't happen. Probably will happen, but we just haven't seen it yet.
Well, I think that what you're going there with the key drops that he has, and the statistic that Eric was kind of bringing up here was amongst rookie wide receivers with at least 20 total targets, there are 3 players in the NFL amongst rookie wide receivers that have 5 total drops: KJ Hamler, Jerry Jeudy, and CeeDee Lamb. Now, Jerry Jeudy has had a handful of really good plays where he's, broken some coverage wide open, taken the ball away, scored some touchdowns, stuff like that. But those big plays are few and far between. And it's more often you're going to see him drop a football where he's going to have a play over 20 yards. And that's the biggest thing. Now, when it comes to other guys in the wide receiver class, you look at a guy like Chase Claypool, who has a plethora of plays over 15 yards. In fact, as far as converting first downs, he's number 6 overall amongst rookie wide receivers. Jerry Jeudy's number 4. But those big plays that Chase Claypool has been able to translate and without the drops has come via the scoring plays. And Jerry Jeudy not being able to translate those big plays across the middle of the field and get big, huge, large gains, whereas he's dropped a couple of footballs. He has like 3 fumbles this year as well. So it's a give and take with him right now. And there are a lot of other players within this rookie class, especially if you want to take a look at like Justin Jefferson, who might be one of the best wide receivers in the entire game right now, like quite honestly, with what he's able to do up in Minnesota. Now, a quick question here. Speaking to Jerry Jeudy and his effectiveness in this offense and Chase Claypool in Pittsburgh and then Justin Jefferson, is there any kind of correlation you can put into the quarterback play that can translate to bigger plays from the wide receiver position, like what Chase Claypool has been able to do and what Justin Jefferson obviously has been able to do up in Minnesota?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, quarterbacks have an impact on wide receivers. That's going to be the case no matter what. But the bigger thing to me is the other guys around them. Okay. I mean, obviously with the Broncos, you have Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, and Tim Patrick. I think Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler, I think their impact would be a little bit greater this year if they had Courtland Sutton. With Chase Claypool, he's got Juju Smith-Schuster. He's got Deontay Johnson. He's even got the guy out of Oklahoma State, James Washington, and Ben Roethlisberger. Of course, that plays a factor into it. In Minnesota, Kirk Cousins to me is about the best you could get out of Drew Lock, which is, we're not going to talk about Drew Lock, but that's around his ceiling of him, not in play style, but just that level. But you have Adam Thielen there. So that's taking a lot of attention away from Justin Jefferson. And got to give credit where credit's due. Gary Kubiak does a great job of doing a scheme that helps the receivers get open. So that's a big benefit there. And then it's just, it all plays a factor into it. The biggest one, obviously, it does come down to quarterback. Having guys like Brett Rippon, Drew Lock, and Jeff Driscoll, all of them throwing you the ball. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of issues there. And one thing, too, with receivers, I was talking about dealing with the touch and the velocity of quarterbacks is each quarterback, the ball arrives a little bit differently.
Yeah.
The feel of the ball, of the catch, is a little bit different with each one. And this is something that I noticed when I was younger, just playing catch with different people, is the feel of the ball when it hits your hands is just a little bit different for each quarterback. And he's had to go through 3 different quarterbacks trying to figure this out. So there's going to be issues there. There's going to be issues because he's still trying to pick up things about it. And with Claypool and Jefferson's kind of the exception here. He just kind of came in and picked up real quick. With Claypool he had that huge game week 2, but they still had the people to help bring him up slowly. This goes back to Cortland Sutton not being there. So it really is. It's just a matter of who else there. And somebody says it in there. It's not a fair assessment when you look at the quarterbacks that they're playing with. That's true, but at the same time, is you can see good receivers make bad quarterbacks look better, and it's just we're not seeing that with Judy just yet. Doesn't mean he won't be able to do that. It's just we're not seeing it yet. Not trying to sit here and want him to be more than what he is as a rookie or anything like that, but this is a guy who he came in with a lot of hype from Broncos fans. He was expected to come in, and I sat there and was talking about how expectations for him were 800-900 yards. He wouldn't break 1,000. And I don't know how many times I got ridiculed for that he's going to break 1,000 yards. He's going to get 1,400 yards. Like, not only is that just uncommon with rookie wide receivers, period, is there's this huge adjustment that Jerry Jeudy was going to have to go through. Every good route runner, has had issues when coming to the NFL because some of the tricks that they have that help them in college, they don't work in the NFL. Anthony Miller, he's one who more recently has come out and spoken about it. And then there was another one who I can't remember what his name is off the top of my head now. Actually, I think it was one of the Ridley brothers. I might be mistaken on that. Also came out and spoke about how a lot of tricks that they had, a lot of tricks that's taught at Alabama, they're just not available there in the NFL. So it's just all these issues here. They're just kind of keeping his performance down a little bit. But despite these issues, he's still doing a very solid job.
No, absolutely.
He's not been bad by any means. He's been very solid.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
No, you're absolutely correct on that. And what was it? 7 catches for 125 yards and a touchdown against that Falcons secondary last week. And it's just been consistent production from him. And we've really been kind of waiting on that breakout game that we finally saw with him last year. Last week. But with Chase Claypool, you've had that breakout game before. You've had that breakout game with Justin Jefferson. Those guys have been playing a lot better within their schemes and without the drop issues. Chase Claypool does have a few fumbles. In fact, he actually leads all rookie wide receivers in fumbles this year with 3. Judy has 2, by the way. I just checked that. But anyways, Chase Claypool has had those big breakout games. He had 3 touchdowns, 3 receiving touchdowns a couple weeks ago, and as well as a rushing touchdown in the same game. It's just you gotta kind of pick and choose your battles with that assessment, because Judy has taken on a role that he was not ever expected to take on as that number 1 wide receiver. Even with Tim Patrick playing at the same time as Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick was never supposed to be a number 1 wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy has taken over that role as an X receiver, as a Z receiver, and has really kind of flourished. And it may not translate to gigantic statistics until last week against the Falcons, where Tim Patrick was pretty well ho-hum. He only had like 2 or 3 catches and was very minimal within his impact. Jerry Jeudy has maintained consistent with what he's actually asked to do. Now, on the flip side of this, the other rookie wide receiver that the Broncos have in KJ Hamler, and this is one that, Eric, you and I have pounded the table for as the Broncos have been completely misusing. And it's not necessarily because they haven't used him as like a deep threat, which is something that he should be used as, but as just the speed and the misdirection and the decoy that you can use with a KJ Hamler. The guy, he didn't run at the combine, but people were projecting him running in the 4.2s. The guy's one of the fastest wide receivers that you're ever going to get your hands on. And the Broncos just seemingly have not figured out a way to deploy him within the offense, like a guy that we're going to talk about here in just a little while when we break down the Raiders, like a Tyreek Hill for the Kansas City Chiefs, Henry Ruggs. they're not using KJ Hamler in that misdirection aspect at all. And his limited usage in the passing game doesn't only speak volumes to that, but the ineffectiveness of the offense to dictate some matchup coverage and to dictate some key mismatches and stuff like that within the opposing defense is a big failure in their uses of KJ Hamler. What can you tell me about that?
Well, before that, I want to get the super chats before they disappear on us.
Okay.
Stumate came in. He came in before we went live a little bit, and we appreciate that. He gave us a sticker, which unfortunately we can't see, with the $4.99 donation. Thank you, Stumate, for that. We appreciate you. You've been showing up pretty weekly on a regular basis. Jesse03 Sports donates $1.99. And we appreciate that as well. Says Raiders the most hated team in the AFC West. Yes, they are.
Oh, yeah.
They're the most hated team. And a lot of it goes back to how they were in the 80s and everything like that. And just a bunch of stuff with that. And then Del Rudd comes in, or Rudd, sorry, $5 donation, says, relax on Judy, guys. Jerry Rice dropped 10 and 11 games, and we know where he ranks now. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. It's something to be concerned about. It's not saying that he's going to be terrible. That's all it is. We're not saying he's going to be terrible. It's just that we are concerned about his hands. He's got a 14.3 drop rate. I looked it up right now, and that's just not good. So it's something that we got to be. It's just something that we got to be concerned about and see what he's going forward. It's not as bad as KJ Hamler's, and KJ Hamler's in college was even worse. He dropped 25% of passes, and right now I think he's right about that same number in the NFL. So it's not that we're saying that they're not gonna be good or anything. It's just saying that this is something that we're concerned about, something that Judy's got to fix if he really wants to be dominant in the NFL. Jerry Rice, he did that. He had those issues, he fixed it, and became probably the best wide receiver in the NFL ever.
I don't even know about arguably. He is most certainly the best wide receiver in the NFL. But here's just something to kind of chew on a little bit here. KJ Hamler has 5 drops and 28 targets. 5 drops and 28 targets. That's one in less than 6 targets he's dropping the football. That's terrible. Absolutely terrible. Jerry Jeudy has 5 drops in 58 total targets. That's one in just about 10. So it's not that we're bagging on these guys, and it's not that we're trying to say that these guys are not going to be good wide receivers or learn how to grow and get over the rookie struggles and stuff like that. But you can't compare them to like Jerry Rice. You really can't. You can't compare. It's the same conversation as you can't compare Drew Lock to John Elway. It's a completely different game back then. It's a completely different game now. And Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler with their drop issues right now in this day and age is unacceptable. They've got to figure out how to secure the football. And KJ Hamler had a drop against the Atlanta Falcons where if he catches the football and then ducks forward, a first down. Instead, it went from a first down to a 3rd and 8. Those are key drops. And Jerry Rice, he had those drop issues when he was younger, and he grew up to be one of the greatest wide receivers ever. But if you're going to say the same thing about Jerry Jeudy right now, I'm not gonna agree with that kind of assessment.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify something that you said. When looking at drop passes, you got to look at how many are catchable. Well, he's had 58 targets. Not all of them were deemed catchable passes. So that's something to just clarify there. He's only had 35 catchable targets. Which means that about 23 off the top of my head, right? 58, 30, 30, 23. It means those were ones that were either too far away, throwaways in his direction, things like that. Now, talking about KJ Hamler is Pat Shurmur gets a lot of hate for him his scheme not being a fit for Drew Lock, which is just completely bogus. The biggest complaints that you can have with Pat Shurmur is the lack of motion pre-snap.
Yep.
The lack of designed rollouts for Drew Lock, because Drew Lock does extremely well when he's designed to roll out of the pocket. But when he rolls out of the pocket, when he's not designed to, he's terrible. And the other one is lack of tempo and then misusing KJ Hamler completely. KJ Hamler is the ultimate gadget weapon. He's able to take the top off the defense. And the fact that he has one of the lowest D percentages, 7.1 of his routes have been 20 plus yards. That is completely unacceptable. The next highest is Brendan Ayuk, who has 14.3. Laviska Shenault is the only rookie wide receiver who's had at least 2 deep targets. That's worse than KJ Hamler. And Laviska Shenault, deep game, he can do it, but that's not his forte.
No, that's not. No.
Pat Shurmur's got to do this, and he's got to start using him a little bit better. And that is something that maybe could help Drew Lock a little bit by giving him the best guy to target deep. But it's easy to see why Henry Ruggs was the top receiver on the Broncos board, is because they valued that speed. But I question now is if they got Ruggs, would they use him correctly? Because KJ Hamler, he's got speed. I mean, he's not just a gadget player. I mean, he's got that speed to take deep. But yeah, anyways, I digress a little bit. Is you got to use that way. You got to use it correctly, and it's just not happening right now. And there are things that Pat Shurmur can do to help Drew Lock, and properly using KJ Hamler could be one of them.
Yeah, and it doesn't even necessarily matter about the deep targets. And I know that was what you were trying to get at there, but it's the pre-snap motion. It's motioning KJ Hamler across the formation in pre-snap motion on jet motion, using some gadget type motion where he moves across the formation, then cuts back around, back behind the running back and the quarterback. We see that a lot with Tyreek Hill in Kansas City, where Hill will jet motion across and reverse field and come back around behind Patrick Mahomes and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and that's all pre-snap. What that does is it completely changes the eyesight of your defense in front of you, and it makes guys move their eyes this way and then have to come back around this way, and it dictates it actually helps dictate what kind of coverage you're actually going to be in, and it helps your quarterback in and of himself try to identify what coverage he's looking at. So if Pat Shurmur can figure out a way to utilize KJ Hamler in that kind of an aspect, it's going to help Drew Lock so much more. And especially when the Broncos go up tempo, like they have in the last, quarter and a half of the last two games against the Atlanta Falcons when they were down 21 points, against the Los Angeles Chargers when they were down 21 points, where there was a lot more pre-snap motion when the tempo was a little bit faster. If the Broncos can figure out a way to utilize KJ Hamler in that aspect and utilize that up-tempo offense earlier in the game, that might open up a whole lot more for this offense throughout the entire course of the game. It's not. I'm not asking for an entirety of here's up tempo. I'm not asking for the Chip Kelly style of offense when he was with the Philadelphia Eagles or going back to his days at Oregon, where it's always up tempo. We're snapping the ball at like 35 seconds on the snap clock. I'm asking for let's get some up tempo stuff. Get Drew Lock in the offense to the line of scrimmage early. Run some pre-snap motion, utilize the speed of KJ Hamler, changing the eyesight of the defense in front of those guys, and then that helps open up the entire offense as a whole. It's a way for the Broncos to help utilize that speed. Now, to move this conversation forward just a little bit.
Real quick, there's just a couple comments that I saw. First of all is, guys, don't spam in the chat. If you spam in the chat, the same message over and over and over, once I see it 3 times, you're timed out. Like, if you're going to have an issue with that, just don't spam. And then one question here is, you kind of hit it, KJ Hamler could be our Tyreek Hill. That's what he was hyped up to be. That was the expectation for him. That's what I kind of figured he would be. We're not using it, and that is something that is at fault on Pat Shurmur. And then had a base case. No offense to anybody else out there. Base case is definitely my favorite guy who joined just because of the picture. He's gave me with the $4.99 donation. Thank you, Based. We appreciate that. He says, how would you rate Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones to Lock at Mizzou? I think Trey Lance is a little less refined as a quarterback than Lock is, but he's got far more tools and a far higher ceiling. I think Zach Wilson is a lot better than Drew Lock is, period. More refined, better tools, better intangibles, better intelligence. Mac Jones, I would take Lock over Mac Jones. I think that they're not the same style of quarterback, but I think that their ceiling, I think Lock has a little bit higher of a ceiling than him. I think Mac Jones has a little bit higher of a floor. So kind of similar in those regards. That's kind of how I would do it.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Yeah, and as James Campbell, our friend from across the pond, wants to actually pound the table here. He says, "Give me Zach Wilson, give me." I watched a bunch of the game of BYU versus Boise State last week, and I tell you what, that kid Zach Wilson is the truth, and he's going to be a top 5 pick this coming year. He really is.
And then last thing real quick is I just want to get this out here. Guys, neither one of us hates Drew Lock.
No.
We are a fan of the Broncos. We are not fan of the player or the name on the back. It's what's on the front.
Yep.
Now, the best thing for the Broncos is Drew Lock to be great.
Yep.
That is the best thing. That means they don't have to go out there. They don't have to find another quarterback. That's what we want. We want Drew Lock to be great. But we're not going to sit here and talk about it's all pretty and roses and sunshine and rainbows and all that stuff with Drew Lock when it's not. That's not who we are. That's not who we are as analysts. That's not who we are with anybody.
That's the key.
We talk about what we are seeing with him. If it's negative, we're going to talk about the negative. Now, my philosophy has always been is you be brutally honest. You don't push the line of yelling and screaming or anything like that. You be brutally honest. You say where they can improve, what they need to improve on, and what they need to do to see those improvements made. That's all we're doing with Drew Lock because we want him to be successful because it's the best thing for the team.
Yep.
Name on the back doesn't matter to me. It's the jersey. It's the Broncos jersey. That's what I want. I want them to be successful. I want them to go out and win Super Bowls every single year. I want them to win every single game. And quarterback, that's just the most important position. So it gets a lot of attention. And when the quarterback's not playing well, it just gets even more attention. In the last 8 quarters, Drew Lock has played 2 good ones. That's not hating on him. That's just being real about his play. Does that mean that there aren't other variables in play that are affecting him? No. And we talk about those variables as well. We talk about the issues as, while I don't think that the Pat Shurmur scheme is completely unfit for Drew Lock, and I think that's a bogus argument, that doesn't mean Pat Shurmur doesn't have issues. That doesn't mean the injury to Cortland Sutton isn't a part of affecting this offense. That doesn't mean the offensive line isn't having an issue against with Drew Lock or this offense. Doesn't mean the lack of running game. Doesn't mean nothing else is part of the problem. Just Drew Lock is a big part of it because he is one of 2 players who touches the ball every single play.
Now, I want to put this one out here for you, and Eric, you're probably going to agree with me on this one. It's scout the player for who he is, not what you want him to be. And I'm going to go back to your number 26 overall prospect from the 2019 overall draft class, 2019 NFL draft class in DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, you wanted him to be so much more as a wide receiver. You wanted him to be a better route runner. You wanted him to be nuanced in his route running. You wanted him to be able to create separation. You wanted him to have better hands. You wanted him to be all these other different things. But rather than looking at what DK Metcalf was and what he was good at, you decided to go in the what I think he needs to be. So go back to Drew Lock in this conversation. What is he right now? Well, right now he's sloppy with his footwork at the top of his drops. He's not reading the entire field, and he's not hitting the easy throws that he needs to hit on a consistent basis that are regular and necessary to be a quality NFL quarterback.
And I just want to interrupt here. And we're not saying that he only takes the short, easy throws.
No.
It's just finding that balance between the deep shots and the short and easy throws. It's all about the balance there.
Well, my biggest thing here is the fact that he will lock onto a boundary read in his first read more often than not than he will actually slide his eyes and side adjust and catch someone coming over across the middle of the field, like what we saw with Noah Fant multiple different times. KJ Hamler, multiple different times. He locks onto the boundary read first, and if the boundary read isn't there, he tucks and runs. And he gets out of clean pockets rather than step up, side adjust, and hit someone over across the middle of the field. That is what he is right now. It's not what he can be. It's not what I want him to be. I want him to be able to step up and side adjust and hit throws over the middle of the field, which when the tempo increases within the offense, when things actually start moving faster for him,
when he has to do less thinking.
Exactly. He does a lot better in that aspect. Now, what I want him to be is that quarterback in the fourth quarter where things slow down, where he doesn't do as much thinking, where he side adjusts and delivers the football across the entirety of the field, not just to one read on either side. And that's the biggest issue that you have with Drew Lock. It's not what he can be that we are analyzing. It is what he is right now. And that's the biggest thing that you guys have to understand. We don't hate Drew Lock. We don't want him to fail. We don't want to see somebody else. I want Drew Lock to be the guy that you see in the fourth quarter. I want him to be that all the time. Because guess what? If he is the fourth quarter Drew Lock of what we've seen in the last 2 games all the time, he's going to be a highly successful NFL quarterback for the rest of his career. But until I see that on a consistent level and on a consistent basis, I cannot say that is who we're looking at. What I can tell you is, like Erick said, over the last 8 quarters, he has 2 good quarters. Over the last 10 games of him as a starter, he has 4 total good quarters of quality, high-quality quarterback play, counting the Falcons game, the Chargers game, and the first 2 quarters of the Houston game. Period. Yep. That is an honest and actual true breakdown of what we're seeing with Drew Lock. And unfortunately, that's not what I want to break down for you guys. I want to break down the good stuff. But if the bad stuff is the majority of what we're seeing, then the bad stuff is the majority of what you're going to hear coming out of our mouths.
And this Bama X came in and said Patriots game was phenomenal. It really wasn't. That game was not phenomenal really at all. The drops were bad, but some of those drops were bad reads on his part.
Yeah,
he locked onto the deep target and didn't look off, and he had an open guy elsewhere. Like we've said this before a couple of weeks ago, and it's why I didn't really want to talk about Lock tonight and kind of getting off track and everything. But that game was full of bad process with bad results. And I'll take good process with bad results
all day.
I'll take good process with good results, of course. But that Patriots game was a lot of bad process with bad results. Like, it really was not a phenomenal game for him whatsoever. And also is one thing that I absolutely hate when it comes to talking about Drew Lock is the people who throw out completely false statements or false facts. And the Broncos offensive line, they're not helping him, but he's not helping them either. It works both ways, guys. Is the offensive line, they can do a better job of helping him keep pressure off him and everything. But he's escaping clean pockets, putting more strain on the tackles, especially by rolling out, and then getting pressure and throwing the ball away. That's on him. That's not on the offensive line. That is on him. Clean pockets, time is there, but he panics.
Yep.
So it's got a little bit of give and take there. And the biggest thing is, in that 2019 draft, the player I pounded the table the most for, especially quarterback, was Drew Lock. He was the guy the quarterback I wanted Denver to take above all others, was Drew Lock. So
I remember that.
It kind of peeves me a little bit when people come in and say that I hate him. It's not the case. And if you think I do, well, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what else to say. I don't hate the kid. He's a kid. He's a kid who's growing up still and maturing and everything like that and growing to life in the NFL.
It is okay to still be a fan and still want the Broncos to succeed and also be critical. And Chase Wellner coming in here before we move this conversation forward, because I'm tired of talking about Drew Lock. Coming in here on Super Chat. I'm with you guys. Keep it real. I want Lock to succeed, but he needs to work on some things, regardless of the adversities that we have had this year. And a lot of those adversities go back to watch the game, guys. Drew Lock, when he plays good, the offense scores 21 points a quarter. Plain and simple. When Drew Lock plays good and the offense is clicking, the offense scores 21 points a quarter. Don't believe me? Look at the fourth quarter against the Los Angeles Chargers and look at the fourth quarter against the Atlanta Falcons. Both of those quarters, Drew Lock played well and the offense put up 21 points. Period. Yeah. Now, to get back to our...
Just last thing on that is Drew Lock is... It just all comes down to the fact that it's what he said. Is when he is hot, he looks like he is the guy. But we got to see it consistently. That's the biggest thing. We got to see it consistently.
Yep.
That's what it all is.
Speaking of consistency, let's. This is actually a really good segue here. Let's go ahead and talk about the Broncos' first third-round pick and cornerback Michael Ojemudia. And the inconsistencies that he has had over the course of the season. He has actually been playing tremendous football, by the way, for the majority of the time. He had a really good game against the Tennessee Titans, had a really good game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, got burned a couple of times against the Pittsburgh Steelers, including that 84-yard touchdown to the aforementioned Chase Claypool, as well as another touchdown on a a schoolyard style touchdown pass from Ben Roethlisberger to Deontay Johnson. But overall, Michael Ojemudia has actually been a revelation, especially given his draft status for the Denver Broncos. Now, Eric, I want your opinion here. What has Michael Ojemudia actually shown you this season?
Well, he has shown me that he's exactly who I thought he was in my pre-draft process right now. And it's something that some of these are things that he's not going to grow out of. It's just not his style. It's not his body type. He's very tight in the hips. We saw Julio Jones, who granted Julio Jones makes even great corners look silly at times. We saw Julio Jones just put Michael Ojemudia flat out on his butt.
Yeah.
I mean, just post corner. I mean,
the post corner was rough.
But he outside this the Steelers game, he doesn't really give up the deep ball. I guess he did give up one against the Jets, or no, ended up getting called for pass interference.
Yep.
Which was a totally bogus call.
It was.
But when he keeps the plays in front of him and he's able to click and close, he comes up and he makes the play. I'm worried about his tackling. That's the only thing that he was a lot better at that in college than he is now. But he has this whole thing of grab and spin and toss instead of just wrapping up and driving through them. Like, that's the biggest thing. That's my biggest concern with him right now, is he's got to clean up that tackling. He's doing well getting there, but it doesn't matter if you're not tackling them. And he's showing up well against the run. He's showing up good against some tough matchups. Not great, especially the last few weeks. I'm curious to see how he'll do this week. I doubt he'll be matched up against Henry Ruggs often, guys. I saw a couple people saying about that. And it's been struggling. He's been, because of the last few games and that Steelers game, he's actually about middle of the pack among rookie corners this year. Jeff Gladney, he's a guy who I was really high on, has really turned things around. He started to struggle a little bit at the season. I think he was dealing with an injury too, and he's really bounced back. And there's a couple other corners who are playing extremely good football, rookie corners that are playing extremely good football. And it's one of those things that his tightness in his hips, it's not going to get better, but he can get better in other ways to help it, and he can get more consistent. And I think that the Broncos, at the very least, found themselves a very capable number 2, number 3 corner that can work the boundary as that number 2 corner, or come in, work the boundary as a number 3 corner, and put the number 2 or number 1 corner in the slot. Kind of what's going on now, I guess, with Bryce Callahan and AJ Boye.
Yeah. One thing that I do want to actually add into this, and Eric, you and I had a pretty decent conversation earlier today about how statistics do not actually tell the entire story of a player's play throughout the entire course of the season. But I do have one that I want your opinion on here. Now, according to Pro Football Focus, and I have this pulled up here, and this is amongst quarterbacks with at least a minimum of 150 total coverage snaps, Michael Ojemudia ranks with the 7th highest. Now, think about this. 7th highest snaps per reception number at 10.4. Now, he also allows against him is 6.5 snaps per target. So just about 4 more snaps per reception against snaps per target. To me, what that tells me is that even though Michael Ojemudia is being targeted often on the boundary, he's not allowing a lot of receptions based on those coverage snaps. Is there any correlation to his play based on those numbers according to what his play is on tape?
I mean, it just really depends on the game. I mean, if you look at the Steelers game, if you look at the Chargers game where he had a rough one, if you look at the Falcons game where he had a rough game, is those numbers, the overall numbers make him look like he's been better than he has been.
Okay.
But if you look at games like the Buccaneers game, the Jets game, the Patriots game, those numbers make him look worse than he is. Right. So it just goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's about that consistency with him. I mean, and he's a rookie. He's going to have these down games. I mean, even all pro players have down games every now and then. So it's just going to be, can he get that consistency as he goes forward? And just gotta see if he does it. I mean, he's about middle of the pack in most things. The only one that he's really not is NFL rating allowed for rookie corners. one of the other corners that I was trying to think of earlier was Jalen Johnson, who's been an absolutely monster this year. He's probably been the best rookie corner this year. Jalen Johnson has been absolutely phenomenal for Chicago. Yeah. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious to see, can he get more consistent? That's going to be the deciding factor between if he is that number 2 corner that can play on the boundary full time and then bring in the nickel, or if he's the number 3 that moves the number 2 or number 1 to the nickel. That's going to be the deciding factor. How consistent can he be?
So you went to something earlier when you were talking about Ojemudia earlier, and as far as his tackling, and this is something that I've talked to you about privately. I've also been not a very big fan of his tackling, but it's not because of the wrap and twist and turn. It's because of the overcorrection with him. And from what I have seen, especially on the boundary, is Michael Ojemudia doesn't necessarily like to wrap up and twist and turn. He likes to just deliver the big blow with the shoulder, and it's led to several missed tackles. Is that something that in his game is going to be a problem for the rest of his career? Or is that something that you think that with those big hits and the big shoulder blows towards the boundary, is that something that he can maintain and actually become a quality tackler over the course of his career?
It's something that he can definitely improve on and become more consistent as a tackler. In college, this wasn't something that we saw from him do a lot. So I'm not sure why they changed the NFL. I'm kind of curious if maybe like Ed Donatel, Vic Fangio, or even Ronaldo Hill, if one of those guys went and say, hey, we want to make a change to your tackling, and this is kind of what he's taking to. But whatever the case may be, they need to figure it out. They need to fix it because this really isn't what we saw in college. And just to address this, Jalen Johnson, I haven't heard one thing about him. Well, here. He has the lowest amount of yards per snap allowed among corners who've played at least 50% of 374 coverage snaps. 1.13. The next lowest is 1.32. That's Troy Pride. Michael Ojemudia is 1.41. That's 4th. In snaps per target, he's getting targeted quite a bit. He's 3rd in that, just above Michael Ojemudia at with 6.5. Jalen Johnson at 7.0, which means he's getting targeted about every 7 coverage snaps. But snaps per reception, this is the big one. This is how many snaps between receptions he's allowing. 13.9. That's top in the NFL. That's 3.5 points higher than Michael Ojemudia.
Yep.
Jalen Johnson has been playing great. He's been getting a lot of talk about actually out there, so I'm not sure how you haven't heard anything. There's actually a lot of people out there that are talking about him for potentially defensive rookie of the year.
Yep.
Like he's really has been phenomenal.
Yeah, Jalen Johnson has been absolutely phenomenal. That's a guy that I know that you, Eric, personally was one of the guys that said that would fit Vic Fangio's scheme specifically. And then I know that Nick Kendall of the Building the Broncos and Mile High Insiders podcast was pounding the table for the Broncos to go and get Antoine Winfield specifically and Jalen Johnson. You put those guys in the Broncos secondary, and I mean, look at what Antoine Winfield has been able to do for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's another guy that is up for Defensive Rookie of the Year right now. Essang Bassi has been so hit. I've seen his name a couple of times. Essang Bassi has been hit or miss. I was very impressed with him against the Atlanta Falcons, specifically in the running game and driving forward on the football and as a tackler. Very, very impressed with him as that goes. It's just with him being such a smaller guy in coverage and tasked with Russell Gage and Olamide Zaccheaus, those guys were so much faster and more athletic than Essang Bassi were, and they kind of exposed him there. But when it comes to if Bassi can stick with a guy that is about the same size, the same athletic profile, that's a guy that you want to have on your football team. And I understand why he made the roster as an undrafted free agent.
And real quick, I saw this mentioned about taking Michael Ojemudia over Jalen Johnson. For the Broncos, I actually agree. Because while I think Jalen Johnson fits the Broncos scheme well, he's not a perfect scheme fit like Michael Ojemudia is.
True.
Vic Fangio has proven over the years that he would rather take a not quite as talented corner that's a perfect scheme fit over a little bit more talented corner that's not the perfect scheme fit.
Yep.
He's shown that time and time again.
Yep.
And it's just, and vice versa. For the Chicago Bears, I would take Jalen Johnson over Michael Ojemudia because the scheme fit is there better. In most schemes, actually, I would take Jalen Johnson over Michael Ojemudia. But for the Broncos, Michael Ojemudia is a perfect scheme fit.
Yeah. Jalen Johnson fits the scheme, but he's not a perfect scheme fit. He can play that outside zone, but he's not a outside boundary zone corner with a good click and close to drive on the football vertically like what Michael Ojemudia has shown. And the fact that Ojemudia's got his hands on a handful of footballs, he's got a couple of dropped interceptions. Well, he had one that was a tremendous interception against the Titans that was taken away from him on a dumb, boneheaded penalty by Alexander Johnson. The dropped one, regardless, Jalen Johnson doesn't have a click and close, which is necessary in this cover 4 scheme that Vic Fangio wants to have. He's more of a body up and go up and get the football. He's more suited towards a cover 3 and a true man style coverage cornerback than what Michael Ojemudia is. However, Jalen Johnson could have fit in what Vic Fangio wants to do. So it's picking nits at that particular point, like splitting hairs. Like either one is a great player. Ojemudia doesn't have quite the coverage right now just because he's been picked on a little bit. And also the Broncos defense hasn't created a whole bunch of turnovers outside of Justin Simmons, who has had, by the way, back-to-back games with an interception. But the Broncos defense hasn't created nearly as many turnovers as the Bears defense has, at least to my knowledge. So that's a big thing there. And Jalen Johnson has been tremendous for that Bears scheme.
Real quick, and since we're talking about coverage real quick, JC Los asks, will Bosby play this week? I heard he's injured. He won't play this week, but it's because of all the stuff with what's going on in the world, all the what's
testing
precautions and stuff like that. They've got procedures and all that. That's why he won't play this week. But
I don't think he's hurt. No, he's got to go through testing protocols, which is weird because he just got released from the Cardinals and the Broncos were awarded him on waivers. So I'm not sure why the protocols of him being able to suit up for the Cardinals last week and then being released and then I don't understand how all that works. But
anyways, let's get to Lloyd Cushenberry.
Yeah,
we got Lloyd Cushenberry, McDelvin Ajim, and Albert Oakley, but I'm here. I'm just going to kick it off with Lloyd Cushenberry here. Sorry to steal the mic from you, but Lloyd Cushenberry, among rookie interior offensive linemen this year, he's been the worst. There's no other way to put it. He's been the worst run blocker. He's been the worst pass protector. He's just been bad. Doesn't mean he can't get better. He's very of all rookie interior defensive linemen, he has been the worst. That doesn't mean he can't get better. But it's just he's smart. There's just some technical deficiencies there, and his lack of length, which was a big concern of mine when he was coming out of college, is something that's really showing up. Grady Jarrett isn't the longest defender, but he completely owned Lloyd Cushenberry because Lloyd Cushenberry lacks that length.
And that's a fair point. That was something that you and I talked about last week, actually. And it was the one of the big key matchups for me to watch against the Atlanta Falcons was Lloyd Cushenberry against Grady Jarrett. However, it's been a hit and miss bag because Lloyd Cushenberry early in the season, especially against the Pittsburgh Steelers, was absolutely atrocious. But you put him against Chris Jones, and he was actually pretty decent. You put him against the Jets don't necessarily. Well, Quinnen Williams is one thing, but the Jets and Steve McClendon they don't have really a great presence along the interior to really push a Lloyd Cushenberry. He had a pretty decent game that day. Who's the other one? He had like 3 games back to back where he only allowed 2 total pressures and actually had some pretty decent run blocking grades per Pro Football Focus. But it's those 3 games, and then everything else has been pretty well terrible. So I'm curious as to why you say that he has been the absolute worst interior offensive lineman as far as rookies go in the NFL.
Because outside of 2 games, he's been terrible.
Yeah, that's
he had an all right game against Tennessee, but it wasn't a great game against that. And then he had an all right game against the Chargers, but he wasn't great there either. Like it's been 2 all right games. I mean, I understand he's a rookie. He's a smart rookie that has some issues with technique, and he's just got he had a great year in 2019 in college, right? 2019.
Yep.
No, 2018. Great year there in pass protection. He only allowed like 3 or 4. I might be off there. It might be 6. I don't know. It was less than 10 total pressures on the season. But he allowed almost 35 or 40 last year in college. This year, he's at 23 with 4 sacks allowed. So when people want to talk about the offensive line and the offensive line is doing poorly, a lot of it can be traced back to Lloyd Cushenberry. He's missing pre-snap reads, very obvious ones, call-outs for his other offensive linemen. He's not always being aware of what's going on around him. And oftentimes, based off of who the Broncos are playing, he's often considered the free blocker, which means he doesn't have a man up on him. He's either to go help double team with Graham Glasgow or Dalton Reisner, or keep an eye for a late blitzer or a stunt. But he's not. And he's just getting split between Glasgow or split between Reisner, and he's just not playing well.
Yeah, and that's totally fair.
As I said before, he's a smart guy. I think that he will totally turn this around and start playing better, but it doesn't change the fact that right now he's playing terribly.
James actually has an interesting question, and I want to take the reins on this one. Would the Broncos be better putting it Cushenberry at right guard and Glasgow at center? No. Quite honestly, no. I would much
Cushenberry's why.
Not only that, but the first off, the chemistry between what you have already going on between Glasgow and DeMar Dotson's, but also not only that, it's Lloyd Cushenberry and the chemistry that he has with Dalton Reisner on his left-hand side. There's a chemistry issue that's going on there. Glasgow, yeah, he can play the center position, but he's also better at guard. And sure, Cushenberry, I think that he can play the guard position, even though he's, as Eric said, he's not long enough to be able to do so. But he's also a much better center. Why would you get guys that are better at one position and then flip them to a position where they're not nearly as good at? Like it's asking for more trouble than what you're asking. Asking for more trouble than what it's worth is the biggest thing there.
I mean, if you want to move Glasgow to center, then you'd want to be inserting either Schlottman, who after a couple games he said I wouldn't want to put him back out there as a full-time job, or Nathaniel Moody. That you'd be wanting to insert one of those guys. I just don't think that Cushenberry is a guy that can handle up at guard. I think the physicality he has is a little bit lacking, but it all comes down to the length for me. Now, McTelvin Agim.
McTelvin Agim, this is one that's kind of interesting just because he hasn't seen a lot of time now. But with the injuries to Shelby Harris, obviously Mike Purcell being down for the season, Shelby Harris being placed on the COVID reserve list, this is a game where, and Eric, I think I know where you're going to go with this, is McTelvin Agim really needs to have a huge game here. He hasn't seen a whole lot of time coming up now, and he's not necessarily the greatest run defender. He's more of an interior pass penetrator, pass rusher kind of a guy. So, Eric, what exactly do you have on McTelvin Agim, and what does he need to do this week for the Denver Broncos?
Well, first of all, you say that he's not the best run defender. He's got a 5.6 run stop percent, actually, which is top 10 among rookie interior defensive linemen.
With how many snaps?
Any.
Any. Okay.
And he, just mind you, hold on, let me find his name. I mean, he's only played 18 run snaps. There's only two players above him who've had more. Carlos Davis, who's only played 8, he's at 12.5. He's actually top. And then Marlon Davidson, who's just above him, has 6.3. So if you cut it down to 18 right where he's at, he'd actually be 7th. But anyways, 7th. But the biggest thing for him is what he offers up as a pass rush. Yeah. And as I do every week, I do a rookie to watch. And spoiler alert, McTelvin Agim is the rookie to watch this week. And the biggest reason why is what he can do as a pass rusher. He is second in the NFL among all rookie interior defensive linemen in pass rush productivity at 5.8. James Lynch, a guy who I really liked and wanted Denver to draft, leads the NFL. Huh?
Out of Baylor, right?
Yep, out of Baylor. And what pass rush productivity is, it takes into how many pressures you're getting and factors that against how many snaps you're playing. So while he's only played 26 total pass rush snaps, he's gotten 3 total pressures. Now, James Lynch, he's only played 15 pass rush snaps and got 1 pressure. So he's getting a little bit more, being a little bit more productive there technically. But yeah, I mean, that's what it comes down to. He's shown he can do it. But again, this keyword that I have, as Nick Kendall likes the word nuance, I like the word consistency. That's what it all comes down to. great players are typically consistent. Players who a lot of fans like that are just all right or good typically lack that consistency. They'll probably be great for 5 games and then bad for 3 or 2. So we got to see McDelvin and Najim have that consistency, especially against the Raiders, because Derek Carr is a completely different quarterback when under pressure. And the biggest thing is he doesn't really use those legs of his to buy more time, which is the best friend for an interior defensive lineman. When that article and the video gets published, guys, make sure you guys check it out because I go a lot more in depth about that.
Yeah, so I want to actually kind of expand on that and So I actually have an article up on milehighhuddle.com right now, 3 key defensive matchups to watch, and one of those is Deshaun Williams, defensive lineman, against Rodney Hudson, the starting center for the Oakland Raiders. And this is where McDelvin Najim is going to see a lot of his time against one of the best centers in the NFL as far as pass protection goes. He's been one of the best centers in the NFL over the last 10 years. Now, where Rodney Hudson is not very good is against the run. He's like the Raiders are averaging only 3 yards per carry, or less than 3 yards per carry, to the A gaps. So
2.9 to the left, 2.7 to the right.
Yep, there you go. So less than 3 yards per carry to the A gaps. That means to the right or the left of the center. So Rodney Hudson is not doing nearly a good enough job. Now, if McDelvin Najim at that 5.6% run stop percentage is the guy that everyone wants him to be, that's where he's going to be the most effective, is going against the run. However, that's something that I want to see on a more consistent basis. And it's something that we haven't seen yet just because McDelvin Najim hasn't played hardly at all. He only has so Eric, I know you have those stats pulled up. How many total snaps has McDelvin Najim played this year?
57.
Yeah, 57.
Total, including special teams. 45 on defense.
Yeah, so 45 total snaps on defense. He's not playing very much. And that's because, first off, he was a third-round pick and stacked behind Jarrell Casey, Shelby Harris, Mike Purcell, and a whole bunch of other players on that Broncos defensive line. So he's had to see some time over the last few weeks due to injuries and have to kind of to fill the void. But with McDelvin Najim right now, if he can come in and show some run stuffing prowess and get off on a quick get off and show that elite hand fighting, man, he was so good at hand fighting. Yeah, that's the big thing. But anyways, if he can show that elite first step quickness, and hand fighting against Rodney Hudson, a guy who's one of the best pass protecting centers that we've seen over the last 10 years, and also a terrible run blocker. If McDelvin Najim can come in and force some quick interior penetration, he can blow up the Raiders' offensive game plan. Plain and simple. That's the guy to watch.
Yeah. And Bama came in before we get out of here and get to our last guy. He's the $1 donation saying good content tonight, guys. Thank you, Bama X. We appreciate that. And glad you like the content.
Yeah,
I see some talking about Trent Brown. Trent Brown is unlikely to play. He's still on the reserve list for the thing we can't mention. And Corey Littleton is as well, which just briefly, Corey Littleton not playing actually is bad for Denver because he's been really bad this year.
Yes, it is.
But before we get out of here, the last rookie that I want to talk about was Albert Okwuegbunam. And the biggest reason why I want to talk about him is because before he got hurt, he was looking to be the best rookie tight end in terms of receiving. His blocking has been bad. I mean, it's exactly what we thought it was coming out of, or at least I thought it was coming out of college. Not that great. But he did show off a little bit more as a receiver, which is the big thing I wanted to see. He can still run that seam. He can still use his speed. He can still go get those jump balls, use athleticism. But the biggest thing I always said, he turned like a battleship. But he showed still not the smoothest of turners, but he showed he can do it a little bit smoother. So now instead of a battleship, he's turning like a semi-truck.
Driving a semi-truck for a living, I can actually understand exactly where you're coming from with that. No, it's been fun to watch Alberto, and unfortunately he's going to miss the rest of the season with a torn ACL. It's been fun to see him come out and provide an extra spark. Drew Lock actually liked him a lot in the red zone. That catch that he had against the Chargers in the end zone where he got his cheeks down, that was great. But the biggest thing is if you can't be a consistent blocker at the NFL level, then you're going to have some tough sledding as far as playing time.
You're going to be very limited in your usage.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. But I think that's actually pretty much going to do it for us tonight, guys.
Real quick, before we get out of here, before we do the last call and everything like that, Raiders game, real quick. Who do you think wins? And just a quick reason why, without going into our predictions piece, which you guys can check that out. It's up at milehighhuddle.com. But yeah, who do you think will win this Raiders game, and a little bit of reason why?
So a lot of it comes down to the absence of Jarrell Casey, Mike Purcell, and Shelby Harris up front. And what has happened with the Broncos in defense in the running game? They allowed 200 yards to the Los Angeles Chargers, over 100 yards against the right at 100 yards against the Atlanta Falcons, a team that they didn't actually have to run the football against the Broncos. But you have Josh Jacobs coming in, and he is a top 3 running back in the NFL right now in terms of yardage. If the Broncos don't stop the running game, which I don't think they're going to be able to, the Raiders run all over the Broncos. Plain and simple. I have it right now, 31-19, Raiders over Denver. And as unfortunate as that is, I think the running game for the Raiders, setting up the play-action game with Derek Carr, and as efficient as he is as a passer, I'm coming at you, Eric, on that one, by the way. As efficient as Derek Carr is as a passer, and the inefficiencies of the Broncos offensively, it's going to be too much to handle. And 31-19 Oakland, or Las Vegas, excuse me.
My biggest thing is I think the Broncos will struggle to get consistent pressure on Derek Carr. And when you don't get pressure on Derek Carr, he will tear you up.
Yep.
And I think that with the weapons that he has, they just have so many favorable mismatches against the Broncos defense. I mean, Henry Ruggs, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, and Josh Jacobs, and the other receiver they have, whose name is not Nelson Aguilar, who also provides another mismatch for it.
Brian Edwards.
Yeah, Braylon Edwards. Brian Edwards. Yeah. And I think that offensively, I think the Broncos continue to shoot themselves in the foot. Not trying to hate on Drew Lock. I think that this defense, and it's not so much a fault of Drew Lock in this thing. I think that John Gruden, I think that the defensive coordinator there, whose name escapes me,
Paul Gunther.
Paul Gunther. I have a lot of respect for what he does for coverages, and he's slowly becoming a pretty tough defensive coordinator for young and experienced quarterbacks to go against. I think that they'll throw some stuff that will confuse Drew Lock a little bit, cause a couple turnovers. And I think that not just Drew Lock, I think other Broncos on offense will be credited with a turnover, at least one. And I have it in my predictions piece, which I mentioned. I sent the leak in the chat. Sorry about that. I think Melvin Gordon has another fumble in this one. I have them trouncing the Broncos, and I really hope I'm wrong. Unlike last week where I had Denver beating the Falcons and ended up being wrong. This time I hope I'm wrong instead of last week.
Yeah, same. And as I usually always say during Raiders week, quadruple F the Raiders. But anyways, guys, that's going to wrap it up for us today on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. So you guys can find us on Twitter by following me at Sanderson MHH, and for Eric at Erick Trickel. Make sure you guys are following at DVDD_pod. It's the easiest way to keep up with what's going on with the Dove Valley Deep Divers. If you're at it, why not follow at Mile High Huddle and keep up with what's going on, instant breaking news and analysis of your Denver Broncos, and also the easiest way to keep up with what's going on with the entire Huddle Up Podcast Network. If you guys are financially able to do so, head on over to huddleuppod.com, get yourself a hat, get yourself a t-shirt, get yourself a face mask. There's a hoodie, coffee cups, anything to suit your guys' fancy, for the guys, for the gals. If you're not able to do so, the 3 easiest things you guys can do to help support the show is subscribe wherever you guys are watching this, on YouTube, on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, wherever you're at. Subscribe to Mile High Huddle. Like every video you guys see. And if you love it, share it out to as many Broncos fans as you possibly can. Now, Eric, before we get out of here, hashtag any last words?
Actually, yeah, just a couple comments. We got one late super chat.
Oh, hey,
from Richie Rich. says, awesome show. Love the detailed conversation. Thanks. We appreciate your donation. And we didn't come up with the name Dove Valley Deep Divers for no reason. We wanted to be those guys that dug in deep. It's why we get a lot of hate for being haters. But we're just looking at the statistics. We watch the tape. We break down the tape and everything like that. We like being able to do that deep dive for you. And while this format makes it a little bit more difficult than the old recorded format, we both really like doing this. Yeah. And then definitely a great show. Click the little thumbs up. Go Broncos. And then Rebels Legacy. I saw your comments throughout the night, and there was definitely a lot of agreement between you and I with what I was saying, and I saw your comments again. And he says, appreciate the show, guys. Love the content and discussion. Amen. We appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Yeah. Nothing is better to me than being able to disagree, still be respectful. And when you guys disagree with us, that you guys still at least like the show and appreciate it. Like, that's just big to us. And then second to last one, Miller, I wish I was as confident as you. I really hope that's what the score ends up being.
Yeah, me too.
Greg Smith, enjoy your weekend, fellas. And to everyone in the chat, you guys enjoy your weekend. And Lance, you enjoy your weekend as well. Though I'm sure I'll be bugging you throughout it.
Oh, yeah. I am not necessarily looking forward to it, but also at the same time, I'm looking forward to being able to at least continue on with our conversation about tonight. So anyways, with that, guys, make sure that you all, please, and I beg this of you, stay safe, take care of yourselves, and have a great weekend. Don't run down with the thing that has been destroying you over the last week. I'm telling you right now, it's been not
feels
fun.
Like he got hit by a semi-truck. His own semi-truck.
Yeah, and the breathing and yeah, it's not fun. Anyways, guys, stay safe, take care of yourselves. We will see you guys next week, and above all and everything else, go Broncos. Have fun.
Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.